Thank you. I have a question for you. Does anybody in the audience know what a hobgoblin is? May I please have a show of hands? All right, very few. Another question. Has anybody of you, or how many of you, have enjoyed a Coca-Cola drink outside of the United States? All right, quite a few. I am Middle Eastern, originally from Iraq. At age 4, I moved with my family to Prague, Czech Republic, Czechoslovakia at the time, as my parents were fulfilling their assignments as diplomats. I picked up some Czech along the way during the 2 years we were there. At age 6, we moved again to London, England. I wanted to interact with the other kids at school, understand my teachers, and be involved in my classroom activities. So in order to help me overcome that barrier, my teacher started sending me as a messenger between my classroom and the classroom across from the hallway. She would ask me to convey verbal notes or messages, or simply involve me in some kind of a task or activity. For example, if you can please go back to Mrs. Johnson's classroom and give her those books back and ask her to lend us a book for our circle time. At first, I couldn't understand a word of what she was telling me. I would memorize what I could, and I just go and convey that message. Until things slowly started to make sense, and I started to feel comfortable with that process. And then I started interacting more and not being afraid of that process of me going back across the hallway, not knowing what I'm saying. So that brought me to a realization early in life that this was not just a language that I was facing, a language barrier that I was facing. This was more of my connection to those surroundings. It's the culture of the environment. And most of all, it's my emotional connection to that place. About a year or so later, my cousin happened to visit me from the Middle East, and we happened to be within the same age group, and I was so excited to see him, and I told him, let's sit down and watch cartoon on television. So he spoke mostly Arabic, and he knew a few English words that he picked up from school. So we were watching the cartoon, and he asked me to explain along the way what was going on. So I was trying to interpret and explain to him what was going on until a hobgoblin came into the picture. A hobgoblin in British English is used in myths and fairy tales to describe characters or creatures with a mischievous spirit, somewhat synonymous to a leprechaun or a pixie. And he goes, "What's a hobgoblin?" I told him, it's a hobgoblin, because I simply didn't have an Arabic word for it. And he's like, "I don't know what a hobgoblin is." That moment left me wondering that we spoke the same language, and I believe I was explaining to him, doing a decent job interpreting and explaining to him what was going on, but yet I can't convey that picture to him. I felt so frustrated that there is no way for me to explain to him what a hobgoblin was if he was not part of that culture. As the years went on, and I moved again from one place to the other, and each place I moved to had its own challenge. So that was my childhood perspective of the language and culture barrier that people face when moving into new places. As an adult and as part of my work that I do, I deal a lot with newcomers to this country, particularly refugees. The first thing you hear them say is that regardless of their English proficiency level, or no matter how limited or how good their English might be, the first thing you hear them say, we want to be involved. We want to be part of this environment. By being involved, they mean by either doing volunteer work or working for pay or taking classes. So what that means is that they are okay getting out of their comfort zones and not being able to communicate verbally with the people they'll be in touch with on a daily basis for some time, just for the sake of feeling that connection to their new environment. Again, it's that emotional connection to that environment. So now I see that perspective not from my personal experience, but now I started realizing it from other people's experience. And then that experience started to evolve when I started working with business people trying to take their products to foreign markets where they need to convey their messages to their international audience. Messages such as slogans and marketing materials or product descriptions. But what I realized that there is not much flexibility in the market in accepting any misworded document or text or mistranslated slogan. Why? Because contemporary business does not enjoy the benefit of the doubt. If anything, companies are constantly under the mercy of the internet and social media in the event of a marketing catastrophe, the simplest of which involves a linguistic oversight within their marketing text. Some companies consider themselves extremely lucky that they have established a healthy customer base and break even in a few years. Some take the next steps and expand into international markets. But very few make it on their first try. So when you decide to take your product elsewhere, it doesn't matter how confident you are in your product, your business plan, your capital investment, or human resources. Unless you localize your product and message, your brand's message, within the context of your international audience, your business will never gain enough traction. To circumvent that barrier, companies hire translators and localization experts to make sure that the target market understands the company's underlying vision. Brand success in international markets is accomplished by establishing a connection with the audience on an emotional level. And that is done by transcreating the message. Transcreation meaning finding a local equivalent in the target language or market that will have a similar impact on the consumer and will drive similar results as in the original market. For example, McDonald's started a campaign where they localized some of their meals. For example, a McFalafel in Egypt or a Mac baguette in France. I can show you a live example from my own experience. A couple of weeks ago, I was in Dubai visiting my family, and I walked into a Starbucks and decided to buy myself a coffee drink, and I was looking at the macchiato menu. And then what we're used to here in the United States, we have the caramel macchiato. But over there, they do have the caramel macchiato, but the one that is highlighted is the date macchiato because it caters to that market. They still carry the original caramel macchiato, but yet they introduced that to that particular market because there's the market for it. While globalization has opened up a plethora of affordable avenues for businesses to expand internationally, it hasn't made the expansion itself any easier. Even for corporate global giants that have navigated the lingual landmines, have found themselves in the center of public criticism from time to time. Understanding the target culture is a continuing difficulty because any misworded text or mistranslated slogan can sink sales efforts before they even start. Nokia, for example, brought their Lumia range of smartphones to Spanish-speaking countries without considering the literal meaning of their flagship product. Lumia, in a gypsy-influenced dialect of Spanish, means prostitute. So, although the word is not widely used, but yet It gained exposure, and it first surfaced on Twitter and spawned a variety of comments. Definitely not a word a company would like to be associated with. But unfortunately, the realization came too late for Nokia, and they faced a considerable backlash for this error. Pepsi, on the other hand, found itself once between a rock and a hard place in China when they entered the market with the slogan, "Pepsi brings you back to life." When translated, it meant literally, Pepsi will bring your ancestors back from the grave. Hardly an infraction in a country where their respect for their elderly and their ancestors is culturally paramount. Coca-Cola, though, used a very successful marketing technique through their Share a Coke campaign, where they took their global brand and made it personal. They looked at each market individually. They selected the most common names, holidays, slogans, and imprinted it on their product. What Coca-Cola execs said, they said, we capitalized on the global trend of self-expression and sharing on a personal level, but in an emotional way. The results? #ShareACoke, #1 trending topic on social media, 998 million impressions on Twitter, and 2% increase in sales of Coca-Cola, bringing the total from 1.7 to 1.9 billion servings per day. Now, these examples showcase the inherent challenge of entering foreign markets. In order to get to foreign markets, your intended audience has to be closely scrutinized. You have to push yourself to be culturally aware. Cultural awareness is often compared to an iceberg, where there's the visible tip, and these are areas of culture that we see manifest in the physical sense. Areas that we come into touch with when we first dive into a new culture or travel to a new country. Areas such as music, food, dance, gestures, greetings, etc. It might also include behaviors, such as seeing people spitting on the floor, or kissing on the cheeks, or ignoring red traffic lights. All depending on your own culture, might come across as being weird, rude, or just simply silly. None of the physical aspects of culture that we see manifest in the physical sense can ever make sense without understanding the drivers behind them. And these are hidden on the bottom side of that iceberg. And these are things such as worldviews, religious beliefs, tolerance to change, comfort to risk, gender differences, and more. So if people are unaware of these differences when it comes to such fundamentals, the potential of misunderstandings, miscommunications, and increased failure modes are pretty much increased. Failed relationships are increased. So now, to all of you who raised your hand that they have enjoyed a Coca-Cola drink outside of the United States will likely feel the connection of what I'm about to say. And this is inspired by a book I read by Dr. Timmy Wire that wrote a really nice book about doing business in the Middle East and the culture of business in the Middle East. Imagine this scenario. Imagine yourself traveling abroad and you decide to buy yourself a Coca-Cola drink. By default, you assume that Coke is the same everywhere because every advertisement out there you see is Coca-Cola's trademark red, and the content of the container is a dark caramel beverage. But when you taste that beverage, it varies from region to region. So what Coke looks like is the same everywhere. It's a carbonated soft drink. But how it tastes varies from region to region to match local tastes. So it's not about the what of things, it's about the how of things.